I'm Ira Vega, usually pretty quiet. I'm the city council member in the city of Woodland and vice chair for this committee. So I'll be happy to get us started. So we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. And then, Madam Clerk, doing roll call.
Thank you. Good morning. Director Andreatta, absent. Chapdelaine? Gallardo? Kennedy? McCully, absent. Rodriguez? Here. Schaefer?
Here.
Soon? We see you on the screen, Director Soon. We see you're in attendance. I'll mark you present. Thank you. Director Veerkamp? Vice Chair Vega?
Here.
And Chair Davin Calvillo, absent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Right now, we'll go to public communications. Any person wishing to address the committee on any item not on the agenda may do so at this time.
There's no public communications.
Okay, no public communications today. Now we'll move on to the consent calendar. There are 2 items on the consent calendar. Do any members of the committee wish to pull any items for discussion? Not seeing any. Do I have a motion for the
Move
consent
approval.
item? So moved by
A second.
all right. Moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Vice Chair Vega, I was just going to ask if I could do roll call vote.
All right, roll call vote. Madam
Thank
Clerk?
you. Director Andreatta, absent. Chapdelaine?
Yes.
Gallardo?
Yes.
Kennedy? McCully, absent. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Schaefer?
Aye.
Soon?
Aye.
Veerkamp?
Aye.
Vice Chair Vega?
Aye.
And Chair Devin Calvillo, absent.
Okay, thank you. Right now, we'll move on to information section of our meeting. Item 3, an advocacy update. Renee Deviroki.
All right. Good morning, Renee Bioki, part of your government affairs team. So we have a little bit of a different setup today. So we're not having a formal update from our lobbyists, but we'll bring them back in June. So instead, we're just going to give you a quick update on what state and federal happenings are going on. So we'll start with our state affairs update. Bless is going to walk you through some of the latest that's happening across the street, items we're tracking, as well as some of the upcoming deadlines. And then we'll jump back over to me for the federal portion.
Good morning, Board Directors. I'm Bless Shepard, State Government Affairs for SACOG, and I'd like to give you a quick sense of what's happening in our state legislature during the process. April and May are very busy months for the legislature. They're wrapping up hearing bills in committees. They're considering the governor's initial budget. They're also having initial discussions on the cap and trade reauthorization. Very important deadline for the legislature that just passed is May 2nd is when fiscal bills had to pass so that they can be considered in appropriations committees. And also May 9th, which was the last day for policy committees to hear non-fiscal bills in their house of origin. In terms of the state budget, this Wednesday, May 14, is when the governor will detail a revised budget plan called the May Revise. It will likely reveal a significant difference from his January budget proposal. The January budget proposal came out before the wildfires in LA. There was also higher than expected revenue forecasts then. Since then, we've heard from legislative leaders that the likelihood of a significant budget shortfall is imminent given the federal budget cuts. But even without the federal cuts, with the federal tariff policies, a Medi-Cal shortfall, and delayed tax filings from our area, our LA area wildfire victims, just steering the state into a difficult financial situation. The constitutional deadline for the legislature to pass a budget is June 15. Given the potential significant shortfall of the budget, the legislative leaders have said that they may need to reopen the state budget in the late summer and fall as we know more about the impact of the federal budget reconciliation. For cap and trade reauthorization, the governor and legislative leaders have said there is a need to extend the program beyond 2030 with conversations happening this year. Details we don't have right now, but I'm anticipating that we will know a little bit more on Wednesday when the May revise comes out. On a brighter note, part of the budget process, we are working with CalCog to extend the expenditure deadline for the REAP-2. That's the Regional Early Action Plan program that funds our Green Means Go program here at SACOG. The extension is going to provide a 12-month extension for COGS to expend their REAP-2 funds from June 30, 2026 to now June 30, 2027. So you will recall last year there was a proposal from the governor to cut the program in half. After negotiations with the legislature and with the help of advocates like SACOG, that budget cut came down to 40 million, was roughly 6%. And as you can imagine, that budget process, that cut created a lot of delays and unknowns for projects. So this extension should assuage those delays. Just FYI, two big deadlines coming up for the legislature is June 2nd, when bills need to pass out of their House of Origin, and of course, June 15 is when the budget needs to be passed. For more information about what I've mentioned and bills we are tracking for SACOG, please do look at your report in your packet that was put together by our state lobbyist political group, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for that. Any questions, comments? Thank you. Quiet group today,
All right, I can jump into the federal update if that's all right.
please.
Okay, so noting a lot of you had the opportunity to visit DC last meet and talk with our members, staff as various agencies. We've dedicated the following item to go a little bit more deep in that. So I'm going to use my time here to give a quick recap of what was proceeding and kind of a little bit of a look ahead. So 2 weeks ago, or prior to our trip, we held our lobbyists, we held a federal webinar to help frame what was happening in DC for our jurisdiction staff, as well as some of the transportation team cap to cap members. So as part of the webinar, we had an introduction to congressional budgeting basics. And so within your packet, you'll see there's some slides to take a look at. Jason did a great cookie analogy. Slide 10 is particularly entertaining if you want to understand more details on that. We also discussed a little bit about handling current grants, as well as looking at future grants and how to apply and be competitive, looking at the new administration's priorities. So once again, attachment C has that information. And if you're interested in re-reviewing that webinar, we do have a link up on our website if you're interested. Continuing to look back, on April 30th, the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee approved a portion of the fiscal year 2026 budget, a reconciliation package. So the bill includes $12.5 billion for modernizing the air traffic control system and $21 billion for the U.S. Coast Guard to support national security and Arctic operations. So to offset the proposal eliminates funding from several Inflation Reduction Act programs, so including what we're familiar with as the Neighborhood Access and Equity Grants Program, the Low Carbon Transportation Materials Program, and then calls for a full repeal of what's CDBG, or Community Development Block Grant Program. And then the bill also, interestingly, it imposes a $250 annual fee on EVs, as well as a $100 fee on hybrids, all of which is to bolster the Highway Trust Fund. The expected revenue would be $38 billion over 10 years. And the packet will now head to the House Budget Committee, where there'll be more discussion. Also, following this bill, will be considered by the full House, and additional committees working to meet the May 9th deadline, so last Friday, where everything kind of gets pushed together for the reconciliation. Additionally, on May 2nd, the administration released what's called its skinny budget, or preliminary budget, for fiscal year 2026. So this is outlining changes to basically non-defense discretionary spending. So the request targets $150 63 billion in reductions from current levels. So which is really a 20% across the board reduction from our federal domestic programs. So for us, the request proposes to cut 22.5 billion in IIJA advanced apportionment. So that's like our transportation funding that we've been looking at. But we do not know how much of the 22.5 billion is new fiscal year 2026 funding, or how much of it's rescission of unobligated funds. So when Jevin and Jason come back in June, we can do a full recap of what these budgets and reconciliation packets look like in terms of DOT. I'll wrap up today with a little bit on reauthorization. So much of the focus for us for the next few months will be on the next surface transportation reauthorization bill. IIJA is really not set to expire till 2026. However, Congress is seeking to really develop this authorization bill this summer. This legislation really determines how federal funds are allocated for roads, transit, rail, and the fundings of MPOs like ourselves. So regional leaders from MPOs, COGS, as well as your elected officials, encourage you to reach out to your delegation staff to highlight what's important for our nation's transportation infrastructure. This is the time to do that. So SACOG did submit recommendations to the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, emphasizing several priorities that's in on our attachments. So our focus include Greens Main Go eligibility, increase in planning funds, and some strong support for rail and transit funding. So attachment C has that detail. It's a portal that you use. That's why it has a very interesting format in terms of priorities 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we will be submitting this as we submit it to the portal, and we are then be working with our delegation members just to make sure they have it unaware and as they're working towards developing the bill this summer. And a little bit on USD activities. So we've been hearing about the freeze. It looks like things are starting to move a little bit forward. 180 infrastructure grants totaling 3.2 billion move forward. So that's roughly 10% of the projects under review. So that review process is still happening. And then I'll pause there since cap to cap is kind of our bigger focus for this meeting to do some discussion and see if you have any questions on any of that.
Thank you very much, and I apologize to this committee for being so late. Accident on I-80 westbound in Newcastle caused quite a delay, so I apologize. Thank you very much for that. And are there any questions? All right, thank you. Would you like to proceed to item number 4?
Chair Dowden Calvillo, sorry about that. Item number 4 is report on Cap to Cap trip and the SACOG tour.
And so who will be providing that?
So we don't have a presentation prepared for this. The item was
Oh,
noticed just simply so that those members who attended the Cap to Cap tour
Got
have
it.
a chance to share out on what they heard and have any follow-up discussion among yourselves.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for that. All right.
Sure, can I
So-
suggest two topics to cover? One is, some of you got to go on the tour, the pre-tour that we hadn't done in about 3 years to Northern Virginia. So thought it would be good for those of you that were there to share some reflections on that tour, what you saw. And then, of course, anything that came off your Hill and administration visits for the first half of last week, any reflections from those? So both of those topics. Really.
Okay, well, I'll start. I actually was on the wildfire team, so I didn't participate in the transportation team meeting, so I'll allow others to comment on that. But I did want to talk about the Northern Virginia tour. Although I was having a relapse of bronchitis, I will say that the tour was fabulous as always. And I had mentioned this to James, that staff do such a top-notch job on these tours. The sites were very relevant. He talked about the form-based code that was utilized in some of these areas. We toured Alexandria and Falls Church, and just great examples of some solid work that's been done. One thing that kind of struck me, there was a fire station that was built into the fire station. The fire station's on the first level, and then on the sides and above was housing. So what I wanted to say was, I wondered how many potential accidents they have, because they really have to be careful. Kids like fire trucks, but they made it work, and it was very interesting. That was a very interesting example of housing with municipal government, and especially with public safety. So, but the transit-oriented, mobility zones, their creative financing, just a great tour. It was a walking tour and a bus tour. And again, it was top notch, and really appreciated all the effort that staff put into that. And I'd like to, open it up to others. I know you, my friend, were on that tour with me. So I think Jill, you were there too. So if anyone else would like to reflect on that.
Thank you, Manager. I will add on. So I was, the entire study mission was very informative. I'm a student of transit-oriented development is a new concept for me, and I love to see how different communities are successful in developing. The one project that really stood out to me was the co-location, and I can't remember the name of the city, but where the community center was co-located next to the affordable housing development. What was the city? Was that Alexandria?
That was Alexandria, wasn't it?
Was that Columbia Pike? Was it the,
The community center that we walked into that.
oh yeah,
next to
sure.
it
That's
was
Columbia Pike. So
Columbia Pike.
that's in Arlington County.
Arlington.
Oh, there
That's-
we go. All right. So I just think it was brilliantly designed, and to have all of those communities and have a baked in next to them. Well, within the development, they had a fair amount of community activities. I couldn't help but smile when they talked about planning a community quinceañera. I think that's just really special. And then also having the community center there where the residents from next door can come over and participate. And of course, the bus stops right in front. And I asked, and I don't think I ever asked it enough to get the answer around where the parking was, because that was a significant development. But maybe they've just managed to hide away minimal parking to have everybody in that community moved around. So that definitely jumped out at me as a way to get creative, to house and have a variety of affordable housing, and also in a way that allows the residents to be in community and have a lot of activities for youth.
Anyone else?
I'm still mad at you for this.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I think the pre-tour for me was pretty fascinating. Excuse me, I think we've done some others that I really focused on how could I apply that to my own community. This one was a little more challenging with that, just because it's just such a different, there weren't this time single-family homes next to, it was so much of it was all multifamily basically, but it was fascinating how they did it. I still don't know how they put you live above a fire station, and they said, because when I said, well, what about the alarms and the sirens? And she said they don't turn on their sirens till after they pull out.
A mile distance, so they don't start them up
Yeah.
until they're a mile away.
That seemed pretty bizarre to me, that your fire truck would pull out without that. As I thought I'm surprised we didn't see anything happen, and it would have been interesting, but it was what a fascinating use to figure that out. I felt like too that I really saw the differences. Falls Church, the little 2-mile
Yep.
city, 2.2-mile city. And she kept emphasizing they were a full service city. And I thought, well, how in the world do you do a sewer station and water if you're a 2-mile city? And then when you pin them down, what we consider a full service city and what they consider, because she said, well, we have our own sewer pipes. I'm like, okay, but you're not processing sewage. So I thought that was really interesting, just how they approach it so differently. But I think they were so fortunate to have such a desirable area that they, people come in and want to live there. I too love that community service, excuse me, station where they, and it was to see it active. They got people in there playing pickleball and living in that community. I thought that was really, really helpful. So I really do enjoy these pre-tours. I feel like I learned quite a bit, but I kept reflecting on And I think it'd be great to go back. The one we did in Virginia a few years back and it was way more of a community with single family. I can't remember.
Probably Kentland's, probably up in just north of Bethesda in Montgomery County,
Yes,
Maryland.
it was Maryland. Part.
What's interesting, Director Gallardo, is you said that, and, you know, we had to, there was a lot of information, right, as we always do on those tours, and we actually shorted you at the end just because there was so much to see. And our hosts in Falls Church were so excited to have us there. What you didn't really get to see is the walking tour of the Roslyn-Ballston Metro corridor. We drove down it, and it is very tall, probably higher density than you can imagine here, but it quickly falls away. And so actually you have single family homes just a couple of blocks off.
Oh,
And those single family homes now have increased in value tremendously because they have all the services there. So a lot of the story of Northern Virginia is very intentional density, right? Form-based codes to allow the market to come in and do whatever the market thinks is necessary. Trying to sort of streamline that development, but very intentional, not encroaching upon some of the single family neighborhoods. We just didn't see those.
got it.
We saw the upfront, we saw the commercial corridors and the old rail yards that's been redeveloped. And so you didn't, I think, get to see those transition zones as much. Although one was kind of cool was the grocery store that you can actually get from the single family neighborhood through the back. So we
Yeah.
tend to build walls around grocery stores, right? That one was intentionally sort of punched through so you could walk from the neighborhood into the commercial area really invitingly, right? And very easily.
And even the parking for the grocery store, there was so well hidden. It's not, you'd have to look to realize that was a parking garage and
Yeah.
the way they did, yeah, that was, and you could tell it was a whole lifestyle. People really liked the lifestyle that they had there with all their, everything was in a walkable zone for them. So I thought that was really fascinating. And as far as the Cap to Cap Park, I thought, I came out a lot more hopeful about the Fed than I had gone in, because with everything we're hearing, I'm thinking we're about to get blasted. I think there was a little bit of consensus too that we're a long way away, but we're California and we're a voice and we're here and 450 strong, and it's time for us to make that voice heard. But I also thought it was kudos to the session with having Ami Bera and Kevin Kiley there together. I thought that was really important. I think that left me feeling a lot more hopeful that we can have some of those conversations. The access, as always, Congresswoman Matsui is tremendous. And I felt like Bera, Matsui, Kiley in particular were very accessible to us, and I think they heard us. So I felt a lot more hopeful about where we're at, that all is not lost perhaps in how this, and cooler heads will prevail in some of what's happening there. Love that presentation too from Andrea Mitchell. I thought that was really interesting and telling on just how we conduct ourselves and what's changed. So, all in all, I thought it was really excellent. But I would love to get back to, I think it's been, I don't know how many years since we did that in the Maryland, but I think that would be well worth it. Because I felt like that was one where all of our communities could do something like that. Kind of like Daybreak when we were in Salt Lake. Okay, that's a doable project that's transit related centered. So great tour. Other than this.
I think, yeah, that's speedy recovery. Director Rodriguez, you were with us as well. Did you want to add anything?
I will add, I did the same thing that Jill did, going through trying to figure out how does this fit in my community, and had a hard time finding some, but the pocket parks in Falls Church I thought were quite nice, and how the community or the city itself was maintaining. And I mean, I know the cities maintain parks, but it just felt different. So I do have to say that the rest of the Galt contingency that came were very tired of me going, oh, but on that trip, because I was just so fascinated, especially with that firehouse, that was pretty amazing. But I gleaned a little bit here and there, and I was just talking to James last week, and I said, what I have been learning, I'm new to SACOG, new to all of this. And what I have learned is that as a rural city, one of probably the, bottom of, not bottom of the list, but definitely not at the top of the list is concern about public transportation. And so that has been very much on my radar and looking at these places that we toured to see that, oh, look, there's a bus stop. I think there are 2 bus stops in Galt total. That's it. And one is at a park and ride, so it's not really a bus stop. It's just they come and stop and pick us up. And as Galt is growing, and Sacramento will never be Elk Grove, despite what the community is concerned about being that big. But if we don't plan ahead, then, and this was part of the discussion in that pre-tour, if you don't plan ahead, then it's just going to cost more in the long run. So I guess that's what I took away, other than the excitement of some of the other things that we saw, is that we need to, as Galts, we need to start planning for the future. And maybe it won't ever be needed in my lifetime, but certainly in my children's and grandchildren's time, we will need better transit options in Galt and to connect both north and south of us. So I was like a little kid in a candy shop, to be honest with you. I was just so excited about the whole thing. And when I got back and annoyed those who went with me, I guess some of my messaging filtered down. And so now we have community development staff who were like, well, I should have been on that tour. And yeah, so next time they happen, I think even a bigger contingency from Galt will show up. We were strong and learned a lot. So it was great. I do have a question, and it's not on transit though, because I have someone who works works at Sac State. And I know one of their big messaging was that hub. And he gave me a call and he said, yeah, my boss said that that's a no-go and it's not going to go anywhere at all and a total fail. So I too came away like Jill thinking, I felt a little bit more positive, and then I got that phone call and thought, anyway, so I don't know if anybody's heard anything about that they didn't get a good response. I don't know.
Director Reyes, can you say a little bit more about, you said the hub at Sac
The
State?
hub, the Sac State big hub that they're going to do downtown, that they wanted to do. No, they wanted to put in they're going to take over a block and a half across from the Capitol.
For like housing?
Some of it was going to be housing and yeah, basically have another campus, a small campus specific.
I think Michelle Willard was talking about, it's a project that she's working on with
There's,
Sac State.
Director Canavia, I mean, there's a lot of interest in having Sac State have a bigger presence in downtown. There's a lot of interest from, say, the Downtown Partnership and the city in trying to figure out if commercial and employment is just, been battered since COVID, right? Can we get more housing downtown? And given great light rail service between downtown and 65th Street, could that be sort of almost a satellite? Where that stands, I know one of the other interesting lessons learned, I think, is it is very hard to repurpose office buildings for housing, right? So it sounds great, right? Hey, we got vacant office buildings, let's turn them into housing. To actually do that, anecdotally anyway, right? The developers that we've talked to downtown, those office buildings were almost built as throwaways, many of them. They certainly were not built for people to live in. And so the retrofit that's needed is significant. So we're certainly happy to come back and give you a little bit of an update on.
I mean, it doesn't have anything probably to do with SACOG other than, because I was on the
Well,
economic development.
It has a lot to
team.
do with the health of the urban core and
That's
the
true.
health of the downtown. So yeah, no, we'd be happy to try to bring some information back on that.
I see that our esteemed chair has his hand raised. Aloha.
Aloha, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off what Bonnie was saying, that the whole intent was for us to come away with how can we implement things like this in our communities and think differently, right? So that if that's exactly, your staff is hearing that, wanting to come back, that's a huge success. We know that there are differences in, East Coast and West Coast and our building standards and fee programs and all that kind of stuff. But having the vision, introducing ourselves to what is possible is the whole purpose behind these trips. So I'm really excited to hear, that things you came back with and that your staff now want to go. That's why Elk Grove staff started going too. So I just want to, give kudos and commend James and his team, the SACOG team, for putting this whole thing together. And I think over the years, it's just really been an inspiration to all the SACOG members that, in the past and now, and, and will in the future too. So thanks again, James and your team, and I'm glad everybody had a very inspirational time there. I also was hopeful too, coming away from the meetings that we had. Again, James, leading that tour with USDOT, FRA, FTA. I think we really made an impression on them, and so look forward to continuing the momentum in engaging with those agencies, not just once a year, cap to cap, but throughout the year, so that they can really get to know us and our projects. I took note that I think her name is Stephanie Perez from I think she was FRA. She latched on to it was a Stockton project, but she knew right away that project when Allison McLeod mentioned it. And it just really resonated that it does matter going back and making those relationships with those staff people who, they're not the political appointments, they stay, right? Obviously Doge being the exception, but in general, the staff there, they stay, and they have that tenure. And as we get to know them and they get to know our projects, we have a lot more success in getting those things implemented. Yield back, Chair.
Thank you. Yes.
Dr. Schaefer.
Thank you, Chair. So I was not able to make the pre-tour. I wish I could have. My colleague did, Kelsey Nelson. She had nothing but really positive things to say about that. But whenever I go on a trip like this, I kind of always try to draw some kind of context on where I'm going to visit. What's that look like? And when we look at the general, while Washington DC is a metro area of about 6.3 million people, much larger than ours, we actually have a lot of commonalities. For example, Elk Grove and Washington DC, the metro area of Elk Grove and Washington DC, have a very similar population density, which surprised me. I thought the population density, having visited Washington DC, I thought it would be a lot more dense. But Elk Grove has 11,664 residents per square mile, and Washington DC, the general metro area, has 11,281. So it's actually Elk Grove's a little bit bigger than that. And when you look at the urban section, whatever you want to call it, however you want to define that, it actually has a lower population density than Galt. Galt has a population density of 4,328 people per square mile. So when we start looking at how we're going to look at things and how we're going to move people around, these are all things that we really should and deeply consider that. And I think that we actually have in our region, we have a lot of population density around the suburbs. It really is. And I think, in my opinion, we need to look at how are we moving people in our local community? How are we moving people when we have a high population density? Can we develop a sort of a sub-transit or a micro transit for some of these regional areas that will carry them to a transit hub, which would make sense? I would love to use RT to come down here, but it would take 2 hours to get down here from Citrus Heights. That isn't tenable for me. So that's just kind of one of the things I drew out of this trip is, how do we look at this? How are we looking at transit? I know that we could continue to look at transit over and over and over and over again as things change, but I think we also we can focus in and look at what we're doing, but we also, once in a while, we need to step back and say, is what we're doing effective? And so that's my comment.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for weighing in and providing your perception on both the trip and the tour as well. Is there any other comments on that item?
Chair Dunn, do you mind if I have just a few
Absolutely, no,
closing
no.
thoughts? I
You,
know.
you may not speak. Yes, absolutely, James, go ahead.
Just a few things. First of all, I just, a couple of you have mentioned thanks to staff. I just want to, in particular, shout out Mia Lopez, Rosie Ramos, Gabby Herrera, Christina Lockie, who did a lot of work to make that trip. I mean, you all who have been on these before, right? You know, the experience, the curating it, getting local people there so you can talk to the people that help make it happen. So staff did a great job, as they always do. I think the other thing is we ended that trip that day, and I made a few brief comments that afternoon. And it's really good to hear the feedback, right? Oh, I don't really see Rockland or Galt necessarily in the heights and the density. But I think what we're also hoping to tell you and have you take away is some of the lessons learned around a vision. So these are communities where there was a local vision, and it was 20, 30 years ago. The rail yards where that fire station with the housing above it was a rail yards, was an abandoned rail yards 40 years ago, right? And the work started in the 1990s. So 30 years and 20 years of that effort. It's a vision, and it is sticking to the vision, right? Not necessarily not sort of saying, well, nothing has happened in 10 years, so we're gonna, obviously you gotta iterate and change course. But I think that long-term commitment and long-term commitment by elected officials, by community members, by community-based organizations, I think that was ringing true across that corridor. And then, as Chair Sooner and I were talking about on the bus as well, tipping points, right? So I think what we're trying to get to are product types and comps, right? And in the suburbs, Director Schaefer, you mentioned, we don't have a lot of comps yet for what we saw on that tour. And I believe, working in the DC area and other mid-sized regions, we need to get to a place where there are examples in the ground. And so the banks, the lenders, the developers, everybody all the way up in that ecosystem of development can see something and say, okay, that's worked there. I think it's going to pencil. So we are trying to, I think, get to this tipping point in this region, and we're not there yet in the suburban context, which is so much of our region. And then just finally, I will say, I thought cap to cap, the meetings were really good. The meeting that Chair Soon referenced at USDOT, we had about 11 of us and many of you as the elected officials there. I thought, we had a great presentation. Nobody read any talking points. You just spoke from the heart. You talked about your projects. Trip to Green in El Dorado County, Director Veerkamp, was actually of great interest to USDOT, that it was innovative, it used technology, right? And they were very interested. We did talk about some of the grants that are still kind of unsigned, but we came away with that meeting having them say to us, boy, you all are passionate about your region, and it's really clear that you work together really well. And I think that was a really important theme that I kind of took away from cap to cap.
Absolutely. Thank you, James. All right, are there any final thoughts on this? Yes.
That just reminded me in the handful of meetings that I went to, I think every time we walked out, they were giving us, okay, you need to contact this person. This is a great program, but you need to contact here. Have you thought about contacting here? And I just felt like they were very encouraging and directing. So I was in a lot of the business climates things, and we went to the CHIPS meeting. I was the no. Yeah, I was the only elected official in there. I did notice a little bit difference of in the meetings when there were several electeds in there and not electeds. And I kind of wanted to suss that out. I don't know. So maybe you all can help fill in that. I felt like as electeds, we got a little bit more attention. So I don't know if that's a true thing or if it was just lip service. I don't know, but I did feel like, because even though I had no clue of anything, I was in that CHIPS meeting just to support my staff member who was just there because she was curious. And conversations and actually always turned toward where an elected official was. So is that normal? Is that, just out of curiosity, but I was very encouraged by their encouragement walking out of the meetings.
Good. Thank you very much. All right, well, that concludes that item. Next on the agenda I'm sorry, one final,
Pardon me.
Yes.
After James, excuse me, mention the cohesiveness, that came through multiple times that I heard too, and that they were, I think, a little surprised and very much acknowledged the fact that we were a singular voice for the area. And I heard multiple times people saying the same thing, that was unexpected and not something that they see regularly. So I think really kudos to the team that we did come across with that singular voice. Thank you.
Okay, going once, going twice. Thank you very much. We are done with this item. Appreciate all the very positive feedback, and again, kudos to staff. All right, again, receive and files next on the agenda, which we just have the quarterly reports. This is informational on only. There are no other matters before us, so without any objection, I'll consider the meeting adjourned. Hearing none. Thank you very much, everyone.